Okay, welcome to the Otherppl show. My name is Brad Listi, and I am here in Los Angeles. It's great to be with you. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you're doing okay. I have a very special Sunday episode for you today. I am going to be sharing an exclusive sneak preview of how to write a novel, the debut course from my new company, DeepDive, which will be launching very soon. We are in the closing stages of the app approval process. So DeepDive will have its own app that will be available in the app stores, and the app stores have to approve the app. You know, there's like a lot of red tape that we've got to cut through, but we're almost there. If I had to handicap it, I would say probably 2 to 4 weeks before we launch, somewhere in there. Could be 2 weeks, could be 4. I think that's the window that we're looking at. It's a little bit hard to predict because I don't control this part of the process. It's kind of up to the tech gods, but I think that's what we're looking at. And I will certainly keep you, up to date here on the program. Today's episode is brought to you by Tin House, publisher of Wanting, the acclaimed debut novel by Claire Gia. Wanting is a searing novel of envy, longing, and regret across 3 lives and 2 countries. It's a book that asks how far we will go for a friendship, a romance, a dream. It is a love letter to friendship. It is a powder keg of impossible interwoven desires. And it is a siren song that explores why, even as it destroys us, we always tend to want more. Again, that's Wanting, the debut novel by Claire Gia, available from Tin House. So a quick reminder that I have a weekly email newsletter. I would love it if you would subscribe over at bradlisti.substack.com, and you can follow me on Instagram and Blue Sky. I should mention that Sundays are customarily a day for character studies episodes. Character studies, of course, is a series on this podcast in which I have conversations with ordinary people about their lives. And I need guests for this series in order for character studies to continue. That's how it works. The only real rule of thumb here is that I don't want to talk to any writers or literary people for character studies, because I do that on this show regularly anyways. And the idea with character studies is that I would broaden the spectrum and talk to people from all over the world and from all kinds of different walks of life. So if you or anyone you know fits the bill and would be willing to speak with me candidly and anonymously on this show, please email me. The address is letters@otherppl.com. So once again today, I am sharing a very special sneak preview of how to write a novel, the debut course from DeepDive. If you're brand new to this, if you haven't heard me plug this somehow, because I've been plugging it since February, DeepDive is my new company. It specializes in the creation of long-form educational audio, and the debut course from DeepDive is how to write a novel, which is exactly what it sounds like. How to write a novel is a course that consists of more than 50 hours of never-before-heard insight and instruction from dozens of the best contemporary writers at work today. This includes writers like Emily St. John Mandel, Melissa Broder, Stephen Graham Jones, Gina Frangello, Claudia Dey, Matt Bell, Porochista Khakpour, Rita Bullwinkle, Vauhini Vara, Vivi Ganeshananthan, Tiffany Clark Harrison, Antoine Wilson, Madelaine Lucas, Lynn Steger-Strong, Deb Olin Unferth, Hannah Pittard, and many more. There has never been a writing course quite like this one. I am the host of the course, and the course proceeds as a series of dialogues, a series of conversations, and it covers the gamut, more than 50 hours. And the core of the idea here is that this course would be something that could accompany a writer over the course of, say, a calendar year while she works to complete a draft. I like the idea of this course being able to serve as a kind of companion to a writer who is working in a solitary manner, trying to get a book done. and it will be available via the DeepDive app. You can get the DeepDive app for free, and then you can listen to this course upon purchase wherever you go. So it's very convenient. You can listen while you commute. You can listen while you're at the gym. You can listen while you're walking the dog. You can listen while you're sitting at your desk. It's up to you. It's user-friendly. And at launch, when DeepDive launches soon, How to Write a Novel will be available for the special price of just $297. That's going to be a limited time only offer. It will get you more than 50 hours of instruction. It will get you more than 50 hours of access to the minds and the wisdom and the insight and the experiences of nearly 40 of the finest working contemporary authors. So you can imagine what has gone into this. This has been a huge labor of love. It has been an incredible amount of work. I see this, in essence, as my craft book. This is my version of a craft book. And in many ways, it is the culmination of nearly 15 years of hosting this podcast and talking with writers. So today, in this special episode, I'm going to share the very first episode from How to Write a Novel. And the episode is called Why Write a Novel? We're going to start at the beginning with some elemental questions, and you will hear me in conversation with the great Steve Almond. He is a New York Times bestselling author of several books, including the critically acclaimed debut novel, All the Secrets of the World, as well as a very good craft book called Truth is the Arrow, Mercy is the Bow. I should mention that I'm just sharing one episode from the course today. There are more than 110 episodes in How to Write a Novel. This is just the first one. So it's a beast. There's never been a writing course quite like this one. I keep saying it, but I really do think it's true. So if you're interested in joining the waitlist for this course, you can go to the DeepDive website, www.deepdive.audio, and you can sign up. You can also follow DeepDive on Instagram and Blue Sky. And of course, I will be keeping you posted about the company's official launch and the availability of How to Write a Novel right here on the Otherppl show. So once again, the first episode from How to Write a Novel is called Why Write a Novel? And my guest in this episode is Steve Almond. Let's get to it. Here is a very special sneak preview of the debut course from DeepDive. Okay, so here we go with episode 1 of How to Write a Novel. And I thought it would be a good idea to begin by asking some very fundamental questions. Questions like, can you actually teach someone how to write a novel? Is it advisable? Is it even possible? Also, why write a novel in the first place? Why are we doing this? And how do you deal with some of the more difficult emotional and psychological, maybe even spiritual aspects of being a writer? Things like failure, rejection, fear, confusion, uncertainty, despair. All of that stuff. How do you cope with it? How do you process it? How do you ride that roller coaster? So to help us get some insight and some clarity, I'm going to be speaking with Steve Almond, an excellent writer and teacher, and someone who has really done the work over the long haul throughout his career. Steve is the author of a dozen books of fiction and nonfiction, including a book about writing fiction, a wonderful book called Truth is the Arrow, Mercy is the Bow. I recommend it highly. Go get it. Steve is also the author of the acclaimed debut novel, All the Secrets of the World, as well as the New York Times bestsellers, Candy Freak and Against Football. So once again, Steve's debut novel is called All the Secrets of the World. It is a riveting thriller and a deeply intelligent and very moving social novel, and it was close to 30 years in the making. Steve wrote and published several other books along the way, great works of nonfiction, short story collections, and so on. But the novel was his great white whale. It was an arduous process, and it took a while. Before publishing All the Secrets of the World, Steve wrote, I want to say 4.5, almost 5 failed novels that didn't work out, that wound up in a drawer and never saw publication. So over the years, I've had several great conversations with Steve Almond on my podcast. Once again, the show is called Otherppl with Brad Listi. And in an episode called How to Write Good Stories, which incidentally is included in this deep dive course as bonus material, I talked with Steve about his career and the long and winding road he took on his way to publishing his breakout debut novel. I asked him about failure and how he managed to keep going, especially in the difficult times, and what he might have to say to writers who might be struggling in a similar manner. Here's an outtake from my conversation with Steve Almond.
I don't have any great advice, but I do know that my failures weren't fatal. I do know that it's possible to outlast doubt. I do know that it's possible to fail for a long time and then finally to succeed. Or maybe that's the wrong framing. It's possible to make decisions that weren't my best and to incrementally, if I'm honest about them, slowly get better and develop muscles that I didn't have when I was younger. And most of those honestly have to do with humility and recognizing when you're activated and curious and when you're interested in the story versus when you're in your head and in your ego. And that too takes a long time, I think, to sort of recognize like, oh no, I'm performing. I'm not really storytelling anymore. So all I can tell them is it's hard. If you're frustrated or you're choked with doubt or you're worried or you're confused, I get it. I've been on that path as well. And whatever internal and external resistance there is to your story being told is a measure of how important it is to try to tell it.
All right. So that was Steve Almond talking with me on the Otherppl show in an episode entitled How to Write Good Stories. Once again, you can listen to that episode in the bonus materials for this course. I am so thrilled to have Steve as an instructor in this deep dive course to help us start things off, to share some of his perspectives with you on some of the fundamental questions that must be answered, or at the very least confronted, if you are going to travel this road and write your novel. So let's get to my first deep dive conversation with Steve Almond. And the question is, can you even teach somebody to write a novel? Is it possible to teach a human being to write a novel, or is it something that you have to just kind of learn on your own through trial and error? Or is it some combination of both?
This is this question that is one of these kind of, it's like a troll, really. It's a trolling thing because it's trying to set up a binary yes, no, when the answer is so complex and nuanced. And the answer is, of course, you can't, quote unquote, teach somebody to write a novel because the central ingredients in a novel are curiosity and persistence and the ability to deal with doubt and the ability to recognize when you've made decisions that aren't helping your book and how to correct them without descending into self-pity and self-recrimination. You need like a team of therapists and some medication and like a good support system around you to deal with all that internal work. That's the internal part of it. And it's crucial. There is also an external part of it that does have to do with, at least for me as a teacher, a whole bunch of category errors that I made all throughout the composition of my many failed novels that I have now found language to understand and express what I was doing wrong and what I needed to do better, if not wrong, what was not serving the story and how I could make different, better decisions that would better serve the story. Does that yield a novel? I don't know, dude. That's where the internal work comes in. But it is absurd to say that you can't help writers figure out and put language to and help them at least intellectually absorb some of the bad decisions or some of the less powerful decisions that writers make when they're undertaking something as absurd and difficult and inimitable as writing a novel. Of course you can do that. I've seen it over and over and over again as a student and as a teacher. Can you teach somebody it's like saying, can you teach somebody to do a triathlon? Except this triathlon lasts like years and nobody is going to end up buying it in the end. You don't even get a little medal necessarily. Like, that's a human and creative endeavor that is so difficult to do, even at a level of getting it done. Anybody who finishes a novel, as far as I'm concerned, has finished the triathlon. They might not be on the medal stand, but like that in and of itself is hard enough. I don't think you can teach that. I think as a teacher, you can try to inspire people and you can try to encourage them and you can try to make them feel some sense of progress or mastery or greater understanding that inspires them to want to do a revision or helps inspire them. And that'll maybe get them to the keyboard for a day or two. And after that, it's on them. You can't teach somebody persistence. You can't teach somebody curiosity. You can't teach somebody humility. You can maybe model it a little bit. I tried to tell everybody who would listen, when I finally wrote a novel that I felt good about, this is number 6. I failed at the first 5 and everyone sucked and sent me into a depression. And I kind of wrote my way out of that depression by trying something that wasn't as absurdly difficult as writing a novel. It's such an act of imagination. And to me anyway, it's the ultimate challenge. Not to every writer. There's some people who are naturally novel writers and they would say, oh, well, I could never write a poem or I could never write a short story. For me, the novel is the great white whale. It's the most difficult, ornate, architecturally, in terms of sustaining the imagined world and apprehending a cast of characters and moving inside their inner life and getting it right. It's the ultimate. So there's no way I could teach somebody, but I can play a role. I think I could play a role, and I've seen that happen. And then, but whatever percentage of it's really on them. 90, 95% of it, 98% of it's on them.
I feel like in my own experiences writing books and trying to write books, I repeatedly convince myself that the undertaking is less work than it actually is. It's so tempting to believe that there could be shortcuts or that it could be a faster process than it almost always is. And part of getting a book done for me is always reckoning with the fact that the labor has to happen. The failure has to happen. And you just have to grind your way through it and accept the uncertainty. And I think that so much of the emotional pain of trying to finish a book-length project, trying to finish a novel, is living with the daily failure and the uncertainty. Like, is this thing ever going to come to fruition? Am I on the right track? Am I wasting my life? All these questions that we ask ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. It's really a loss of faith. I think what's beautiful and amazing about starting a project is everything's possible. And you're so excited. And that voice, that curiosity, that sort of passionate engagement with the character's fears or desires, or just with the language itself, that process of discovery is so exciting. And so you have this tremendous energy and faith at the beginning, especially of a novel for me. And the point where there's nobody who can teach you, and it's like where you hit page 100 or 150 and it's not enough. You can't go on voice or style or a great premise. You need a blueprint, and you need to be able to step back and say, what is the story I'm trying to tell? Who is the central character? What is their internal conflict? How is the plot cleaving, associations and that I'm having wildly to some kind of chain of consequence? And that's where the hard work is. And it's almost like the Garden of Eden. That's a story to me that's about moving from a world of innocence and hope, and there are no wrong decisions in the Garden of Eden, to this like terrible moment where you bite the apple and there's tremendous excitement. But there's also this knowledge of like, oh man, I could screw it up. Maybe I am wasting my life. It's really having to reckon with the moral and intellectual and creative complexity of a book-length project. And it kind of wrecks a lot of people. It certainly wrecked me over and over again. It didn't mean I stopped writing the novel, but there was this other thing happening as my fingers were moving and I was pushing the characters around, which was another voice saying, this is doomed, dude. This is not working. And interestingly, the more that voice was saying, you don't have a plan, you don't really know what this is about, so forth, it affected me because I started flogging the language to try to solve those other problems. In other words, the ego need drives you to make a whole set of decisions that aren't in the service of the story. Ultimately, if it's working well, you're more interested just in the story itself than whether you're telling it well. Those thoughts, those self-hating, self-loving, wishing for an audience to love you and publish and give you awards, all that stuff is understandable, but it really acts deleteriously on the creative process. You need to be in there with your characters, but you've got all these voices of ego need that are causing you to doubt yourself and then try to overcome that by performing rather than storytelling.
So I think I'm quoting Nietzsche, and I don't mean to get precious about it, but there is, I think, this idea that if you have a strong enough why, the how will take care of itself, which I think there's some truth to. When somebody is really like clear on their sense of mission or clear about why they're doing something, then however arduous the task may be, they're able to endure it. And I think this can be useful when you are writing a book. And I think oftentimes writers, myself included, especially in the early stages, might not know why they're even writing a novel in the first place, a particular novel, but maybe why they're writing, like broadly speaking, in the first place. Why write a novel? Why should a person do this? What's the value in writing a novel and in putting this upon yourself and undertaking this incredibly difficult task?
Yeah. I mean, that's my breakthrough, Brad, was the moment in my life where I asked that very question and just said, I failed at this so many times. It's clearly a hang up. I've got so much ego pressure on this thing that it's kind of doomed from the jump. Maybe I should just stop trying. Nobody other than me is waiting for Steve Almond to write a novel. I promise you. I've seen the numbers. Nobody's waiting. And so I did. I stopped. I surrendered. I said, enough. I'll just write the other things that come to me easier. And in a weird way, that opened up the space for the muse to walk this character, Lorena, who got me so jazzed. Like that's what allowed that to happen, I think, was that I wasn't putting
in your excuse me, but in your novel, All the Secrets of the World.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. So that's the novel. I mean, I co-wrote a novel with Juliana Baggett years ago, which was kind of a series of short stories back and forth. I mean, it is a novel and everything, and it does have a plot, but I sort of put it aside because it wasn't a solo novel. And also All the Secrets of the World had a very ornate plot. I think, at least at the level of plot, writing in a much more sophisticated way than that novel I wrote with Juliana Baggett, which I love. And I'm still happy we wrote it together and they made a nice movie out of it and everything. But in terms of that internal challenge that I had, that voice saying, when are you going to write a novel, Almond? It was liberating for me to realize that the pressure, the ego pressure to write the novel was inhibiting my ability to just be interested in the character and not worry about whether it was a novel or not, but start worrying about Lorena. And that's almost the way that I would say it. Anytime you're conceptually thinking about the writing of a novel, you've kind of moved into a dark place, at least if you're me, because the novel had such a talismanic impact on me. It was so obviously some kind of ego milestone. It's more instructive and helpful to think about a character or a story. And that's how I thought of Lorena and the story that Lorena was leading when I was writing it. I wasn't thinking I'm at work on a novel. I was thinking, Lorena's in trouble now. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's actually helpful for people if they're asking that question, why write a novel? Should I be writing a novel? Like there's something self-important in the whole thing. It's at the level of me producing something that feels to the world weighty. And that's very different than being humanly curious about a particular character or set of characters who are in a struggle.
What are some of the rewards of writing a novel? If we're looking for a why, like it's not like it's just a one-way street and you're providing, a service to the world and enduring this labor on behalf of whatever reader you ultimately find. There is something in it for the writer, right?
Oh God. I mean, just to have that kind of imaginative immersion, it's not like I just wanted to write a novel because, I wasn't loved enough as a child or, I had competitive anxiety with my siblings. I mean, that's part of it, but it's also a bigger canvas. It's friggin' exciting. You get to work with a larger cast. And I love short stories. That's my native form. That's the thing probably that I'm the best at. And yet, a short story, like my dad said this, and it's probably significant that my dad said this. He said, I like your short stories, but I always wish they would go on longer. They just stop. And I spent all this time getting committed to this character and then the story's over. And I'm like, okay, so probably I didn't really nail those stories, but larger point, I hear what he's saying. If you're going to get involved, why not commit? And, for me, the novel was a chance to commit in a longer term way. And for many novels, that commitment, I think, became repetitive and like an unhappy commitment. But when it hits and you keep discovering secrets, secret strengths, secret weaknesses, secret transgressions, secret impulses about your characters, and you're able to work with more than just one character, you're building like this set of ramps, and there's this there can be a kind of elaborate architecture. And it's just this immersive experience that you can't get, or I think the best short stories have the emotional impact of novels, but they don't last as long. A novel is like, hey, come in, take your shoes off. I'll set the tea to boil, and we're going to be here for a couple of hours, and then you're going to come back a number of different times, and the story is still going to be there for you. I did that imaginative work. Those people are still alive in your head and heart. And I think that's just an exciting kind of immersion to be in. I found it mostly tortuous, but when it's working and I really feel like I'm concerned about all the characters and I've gotten them into all this complicated danger and I have to figure out how to solve the problems that the narrative presents, there's something really deeply nourishing about that. I say that as somebody who kind of largely views writing as just miserable and difficult and doubt choked. But I did feel like, wow, I kind of can see where this is headed. And I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'm excited to get there.
Almost every writer, I got to believe every writer, deals with failure to greater and lesser extents. Pretty much everybody deals with self-doubt and confidence issues, maybe particularly in the early stages of a career. But really, these things kind of trail us. I have found anyway. I don't know if you would agree, but fear, writer's block, false starts, rejection, failure, jealousy, all the things that plague people. And let's just, for the sake of this conversation, focus on writers. How do you get past this stuff? Like, how do you get over these emotional hurdles so that you can actually focus on the work and be productive and do your best work?
Yeah. I mean, the way I think of it is you don't get past it. You manage it. And it's not, those dials are in you, and they were installed by the people who are trying to love you and, doing their best, but sometimes, not being so helpful, and by whatever other relationships that you got into, maybe partly based on some of the patterns in those early relationships. But there they are. There are those dials. There's the ego need dial and the doubt dial and the self-loathing dial and the hopelessness dial and whatever, all of them. And the competitive anxiety dial. And they're in there, dude. They're installed, not at birth, but they're installed by the time you're doing creative work. And about the best you can do is recognize, okay, the dials are there. And today it's feeling like this competitive anxiety dial. I just read a review of another novelist who I consider a peer, and it's getting all kinds of awards, and it sounds really ambitious, and it might even be some of the same stuff I'm writing about. And so on that day, that dial gets cranked way up. It doesn't allow you to hear your characters or spend time with them in a way that's purely curious and committed to their, sort of the place that you meet, which is between their imagined existence and your conscious intention. And, the dial is just interfering with that. And some of the ego is turned up as well. And some of the doubt gets in there. The only thing you can do, at least the only thing I've done, is just recognize those dials are there. And my job is to not get rid of them and not be furious that they're there and I'm so terrible that I can't be a stronger person, or I can't concentrate better, or that I'm so petty, or blah, blah, blah. That self-loathing is another dial, gets activated by the presence of those dials. All you can do is just try to turn them down, and also admit that there are some days that you can't. Writer's block is with us always, right? It's like, like Christ says of the poor, the poor ye shall always have with ye. Writer's block and those inhibiting feelings are they're part of the arrangement. They're the price of doing business. And rather than getting down on yourself or seeing it as a personal failing, you just go, okay, this is what's coming up today. And I can try to write through it. But when I'm writing, I'm constantly, these inhibitive, doubt-choked impulses are continually overtaking the ravenously curious, creatively alive, optimistic, hopeful, humble impulses that cause us to be able to step outside of our own heads and hearts and kind of transport ourselves into a fictional character in a particular situation and really plug into what they'd be thinking and feeling in that moment or set of moments. That's hard to do. Requires a lot of concentration. You got to turn down a lot of dials, but I don't think you're going to get rid of them. And I think sometimes you have to say, okay, the block is with me right now. All creative states are temporary. And, that can be seen as really bad news, but it also means it's also good news. It means that those blocks are going to end and those dials are going to get turned down, just maybe not as soon as you would like.
Yeah, it reminds me of times in my writing life where things are not going well. And this is going to happen often in the course of a book-length project. And I think it can be tempting to believe that it's like the disease is terminal, like not to use like too dark of a metaphor. But if you are working on a book-length project and you have a bad week or even a bad month with a manuscript, or you find yourself writing down a path that you later realize wasn't right for the story. Yeah. And so you lose 10,000 words that you wrote and you have to kind of start over on that section or go in a different direction. You're not doing it wrong. And I think people need to hear that. That's how it goes, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking a lot recently, Brad, and it's going to sound really, I don't know. This is sort of a devastating thing to realize, but I really believe it. I think the great tragedy in life and also the great beautiful thing about human consciousness and human beings is that we're trying our hardest the whole time. We're trying our hardest. It's devastating to admit that. There's some idea or some fantasy we have. If I just had more stick-to-itiveness, if I had more grit, if I had a stronger ego, if I'd had da-da-da-da, if. The truth is you're trying your hardest the whole time. When you're unable to write, unable to get to the keyboard, you are battling. It's like when people look down their nose at people who are mired in poverty or self-destructive decisions, addicts, or people who are unhoused and just go, God, boy, what weak people. Bullshit. They're trying their hardest. Everybody's trying their hardest. It's tragic, but it's also quite beautiful to say, okay, in these moments of struggle, it's not like I'm not trying. It's just not working like I want it to work. And my job is to try not to beat myself up and to figure out, to recognize that tomorrow and next week and next month and maybe even next year, I will be able to meet the challenges creatively that I've set out for myself. And also, if I don't, that's part of the process. I look at the novels that I failed at. That novel, All the Secrets of the World, came out when I was 55, dude. In my head, I was publishing a novel at 30 and then 35 and then 40 and then 45 and then 50. And then I gave up. Come on, like everybody, like lighten up on yourselves. I'm not saying like sit around, eating bonbons, but like it's really a tough thing to try to make anything. And the more you can hold on to that idea that you're trying your hardest, it's just not working out the way you want it to right now, I think the better positioned you are to kind of let yourself off the hook. You're trying your hardest, even in the eras, maybe even especially in the eras where things are going sideways.
So you wrote a craft book, an excellent craft book called Truth is the Arrow, Mercy is the Bow. And there is a section in that book called The Price of Entitlement and the Wisdom of Failure, which I would like us to address. And I think there's an example about a student, former student of yours that you call Sarah in the book. And you use an experience that you had with her as a way of illustrating the problem of entitlement in writers and in ourselves. But can you talk about what that is, the problem of entitlement in a writer?
Yeah, I mean, the problem of entitlement is when you find yourself blaming the world for your struggles, that it's the world's fault. It's it's saying if I've failed, it's not on me to face it and reckon with it. It's not something I have to correct. It's something the world just didn't recognize my genius. And it's really tempting. Like I saw it in Sarah because she came into my class with a sense that she was a great writer, and she was very show-offy in her writing and used lots of wacky plot twists and adjectives and whatever. And I was like, can you just tell me the truth in simple, direct language? And she was paired with another student in the workshop who was shaking like a leaf. She was so terrified because she had actually written an obvious piece of autofiction about kind of losing her virginity to a predatory older man. And it was like written, it was the truth. That feeling that you get when you're just like, okay, somebody's telling me the truth. Maybe a little bit of it's disguised, but most of this is just like, this person has lived through this. And the urgency of getting it from the inside to the outside and not being alone with it. And it was just startling what happened in that room energetically. Sarah's show-offy performing, aren't I witty, aren't I clever, was just like met with this surge of painful reality that a lot of people in that room, especially the women, but everybody in that room, was immediately understood and had some version of, yes, I have been in that room. And Sarah was devastated by that. And I didn't have the skill as a teacher to, I don't know, to say to her, listen, you know, be happy, be glad that you were in the room when that fellow student of yours who had much less confidence than you somehow found the truth inside themselves, and, you know, try to be inspired by that. And also your writing is good too. And you're trying to do something different. And, you know, let's figure out how to make you the best writer you can be. I don't think I was supportive enough of her. So that's on me. But Sarah's attitude was to get fixated on the grade that she was given. You know, she got demoralized. She stopped doing the assignment. She started mailing it in. And I gave her, like, you know, the kind of B-. I'm not giving you a worse grade because I don't want the hassle. And she got so furious, sent me everything she'd worked on during the semester and kind of stalked me for a while. And now I look back at that and say, gee, I wish I'd helped that student more, and recognized that she was just so disappointed in herself and felt so hurt and rejected by the very different responses. Like, she thought she was coming in to clown school, and it was like this intense seminar on truth and reconciliation. And I just see it a lot in writers who are up against, they've made considerable sacrifices to think of themselves as writers, in an era where reading is diminishing and the amount of deep concentration required to, like, read a short story or a novel or whatever, let alone to turn it into a commodity. That market is getting, you know, smaller and smaller, but their commitment to it is such that they're almost hedging their bets by saying, if it doesn't work out for me, it's not because I failed. It's because the world failed me. And I totally understand the impulse. I've said it a million times, and it's always been bull, and I've always known it's bull, and it's not been helpful to me, but I guess it's kind of a coping mechanism. Now I look at it and say, okay, I failed, or I didn't succeed as much as I wanted to. What can I learn from it? But I'm an old dude now, and I've been kind of had my ass kicked by parenthood and marriage and friendships and, you know, professional disappointments. And I can kind of look back and say, yeah, I'm pretty much the reason that things go south. Not all the time, but most of the time I'm at least contributing, if not authoring, my own disappointments and disasters. And the best I can do is to have the humility to try to figure out how I screwed it up, and try to, you know, screw it up less the next time.
Yeah, I mean, the word that sticks out to me is humility. And there's a line in Truth is the Arrow where you talk about converting humiliation to humility. And so when it comes to entitlement and to this blaming process that we sometimes go through, like looking outward and sort of wagging our finger at the world, at some point, the feeling of humiliation that's kind of powering that reaction has to be converted to humility if we're going to get good work done.
I think so, because you have to be, it's linked to patience. If you just feel humiliated, it's such a painful state, you can't stay in it. You know, but if you have a certain amount of humility, you say, that sucked. I wish I could have done that better. It's so disappointing. I spent those so many months on those 20,000 words. I'm not going to be able to use any of them. God, that's disappointing. But I was trying my hardest, and I know that I can look at these words in a couple of years and maybe have some better understanding of why they weren't doing the work I wanted them to do. And even if not, I was still at the keyboard. I was still making decisions. And that's something that's time in heaven. I should give myself praise for that. I think we fall into this binary of we're either working well or we're not working well. And for me, the pivot between those two things is microseconds. It's little moments of ego distraction. In the writing of a single paragraph, I can get blocked like 37 times. And we think of it as, you're blocked or you're not. You're flowing, you're in the state, you're Kerouac, or you're like, sort of climbing inside a bottle and totally blocked. I just think it's the lived experience of a writer is I'm constantly navigating my way through, trying to stay on the side of humility and curiosity, and other parts of me dragging me into humiliation and entitlement.
All right, so we are going to stop there with this first episode. That was Steve Almond, author of several books, including the novel All the Secrets of the World, and a craft book entitled Truth is the Arrow, Mercy is the Bow. Let's do a quick review. Steve and I talked about whether or not you can teach someone to write a novel, and the answer is kind of, or yes, but only to a point, because ultimately, you as the writer need to learn how to write your book in your own way and on your own terms, through reading deeply and carefully, and most importantly, by sitting down in the chair and writing. Nobody can write your book for you, and there is so much internal work that you have to do in order to get your novel done. Nobody, for example, can teach you persistence. That has to come from you, from within. That said, a good teacher or a course like this one can offer inspiration and encouragement and consolation and information and a greater understanding of the task at hand. Steve and I also tried to answer the question, why write a novel? And interestingly, this very question helped Steve on his way to writing All the Secrets of the World. He realized, after several failed attempts at writing a novel, that there was so much self-created ego pressure on the process that it was inhibiting him. And when he learned to let go of that, and he turned his focus and his central concern to his characters and their plight, things started to work, and his novel began to cohere. Steve and I also spoke about the rewards of writing a novel. Steve talked about the deep nourishment that he gets from immersing himself in his fiction and in the lives and challenges of his characters, and how this feeling of deep immersion and the meaning and nourishment that he derives from the creative process, how all of that makes the more difficult aspects of writing fiction worth the trouble. We also talked about getting over the negatives: fear, doubt, failure, anxiety, entitlement, and so on. These are the kinds of feelings and experiences that can sometimes hinder our ability to get our best work done. Steve talked about finding some degree of acceptance when it comes to these kinds of things. When it comes to, for example, writer's block, rather than trying to repress it, it's better to recognize that it's there and to do your best to turn the dial down and quiet the more unhelpful voices in your head. And just remember that all creative states, the good, the bad, the ugly, are temporary. If you find yourself existing under a cloud, know that the cloud will eventually pass. As for entitlement, this is when you find yourself blaming the world or blaming other people or external circumstances for your creative struggles. Rather than indulging in this kind of attitude, Steve talked about how it's more helpful to operate with humility and curiosity, to use whatever ill feelings we might have, humiliation or disappointment, and to work to convert them into a humbler approach to the work, and to take on a more gentle approach to your own struggles and shortcomings. When in doubt, be humble and be curious. Okay, so I think that does it for this first episode. Thanks for listening. Don't forget that links and book titles and all other key information from this conversation with Steve Almond can be found in the show notes. I appreciate you tuning in. The next episode is ready when you are. All right, there we have it. That was the very first episode from How to Write a Novel, the debut course from DeepDive. The episode is called Why Write a Novel, and the guest was Steve Almond, author of several books, including the debut novel All the Secrets of the World, and a craft book called Truth is the Arrow, Mercy is the Bow. For more on Steve, check out his website at stevealmondjoy.org. And to join the waitlist for How to Write a Novel, head on over to the DeepDive website, www.deepdive.audio. You can sign up there. You can also follow DeepDive on Instagram and Blue Sky. Once again, DeepDive should be launching in the next 2 to 4 weeks. How to Write a Novel will be available via the DeepDive app. For a limited time only, it will be available for $297. That will get you more than 50 hours of instruction and insight from dozens of today's leading writers. It's an incredible deal, and that's the point. It's very important to me as, I guess I'm an entrepreneur, but it's very important to me as a human being that anybody who buys this course or buys any course from DeepDive, I want people to feel like they got an incredible deal. That's kind of the benchmark that I'm using. So more than 50 hours for a special limited time only introductory price of $297. I promise you, if you get this course, you're going to be like, wow, I can't believe this is all that it cost. You can't get anything similar anywhere else that I'm aware of. So stay tuned. Join the waitlist at deepdive.audio. Follow DeepDive on Instagram and Blue Sky, and I will keep you posted about launch right here on the Otherppl show. Speaking of which, if you're not subscribed to this podcast, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Follow the Otherppl show on Instagram and Blue Sky. Sign up for my newsletter at bradlisti.substack.com. And if you love what I do, if you love this show, if you tune in week after week, I hope you will support this program over at patreon.com/otherpplpod. If you want to join the Otherppl book club, that is my book club, or if you want to get an Otherppl t-shirt or a sweatshirt, you can do all of that at the show's official website, otherppl.com. And last but not least, if you have a couple of minutes and you want to help me out, do me a quick favor, please give this podcast a rating wherever you listen. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it is, rate it, review it. It helps the show in the algorithm and it helps it find new listeners. Okay, so coming up on Tuesday, there will be an episode, and I'm not going to tell you who it's going to be because I haven't recorded it yet. I'm flying by the seat of my pants. I'm superstitious about it. I don't like to announce a guest until I've actually got it in the can. So I don't have it in the can, so I'm not going to tell you, but there will be a regular interview with an author on Tuesday, fingers crossed, and stay tuned.